Yeah, guys, we're rolling. Episode whatever. So we're going to change it up. We're going to get back to my biographies. And this is another episode of American Biography. And today we're doing Doc Holliday, which is, of course, is one of my favorites. You know, I'm always doing Tombstone stuff. Yeah, Doc was the legend of the Wild West. I mean, he was a dentist, a gambler, a gunslinger, you know, and he was witty. He was a super witty guy, but, you know, it was turbulent, much like a lot of people's life was in the frontier. And I kind of want to knock out a little bit of his life. See, here's what's happening. Here's what I'm doing, just to fill you guys in, is I'm going to, because in American history, we got zero education in my neighborhood. I definitely went to the worst public schools of all time, and so we got no education. You know, and I'm very interested in American history and in world history also, but you know, you really got to focus on smaller niches. You know, American history. So we're gonna do American, and I like biographies, so that's how we're rolling. And let's jump right into it. Doc Holliday, John Henry Holliday was his real name. Born in 1851 in Griffin, Georgia. He was raised as a Southern aristocrat, so they had some cash. And this was a post-Civil War. And this was a time of a lot of change and hardship in the South. And his father was a veteran and was in many, many wars. There was a lot of discipline in that family. They did not play, you know, the veterans. So his mother was also an intellect as well. So there was a lot of learned kids in there. And Doc Holliday excelled academically and showed a lot of early aptitude for language and the arts. Interestingly enough, I think we all know how Doc died of tuberculosis. I guess, you know, I don't really believe a lot in, I guess in heretic type of diseases like cancer. Like, that's just such a bad way to go, where you're just like, well, my mother died of cancer, so I guess I have to, you know. But here, it definitely did. Tuberculosis. Mother died when he was 15 of tuberculosis. This loss affected him profoundly. You know, it foreshadowed his own battle with the disease. You know, at 19, Doc entered the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery, and that's why we call him Doc, where he graduated in a degree in dentistry. Now, he was skilled and ambitious, but fate had other plans for our boy Doc. Shortly after his successful dental practice, by the way, in Atlanta, Doc was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And of course the doctors, well, look, back then you got a prick in your finger. Well, that's an infection. That finger's got to come off. That's how that went down. But Doc was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and doctors gave him only a few months to live. As you know from all the great movies, one of my favorite movies, Tombstone, you know, Doc was, he didn't care if he died. He didn't care if he lived or died. And that's what made him a great friend. That's what made him a great ally, because he could take boys out, and he didn't care if he took one, because he was going to die anyways. That's what Doc became, a learned dentist, an aristocrat, turned into a gambler and a gunslinger. You know, he said, "Fuck it, let's go out heavy." So, you know, believing his days were numbered, Doc left behind the world of dentistry and sought after an adventure in the West. From Atlanta. You know, we had to do a lot from Georgia to Atlanta, then to the Wild West. You know, it's a lot of traveling, a lot of fighting through the weather, a lot of fighting through bandits and snakes and Indians and everything, you know. So he left all that behind. I guess what they say is that he was looking for a drier climate, you know, because that's what they tell him. You don't want the moistness in your lungs, so you want a drier, desert-like climate. So he hoped to find that dry climate and alleviate some of his symptoms. He first landed in Dallas, Texas, where he began his transformation from Southern gentleman to a notorious gambler and gunman. Love that. In Dallas in the late 1870s, he was bustling, but it was a rough city. He was teaming up with cowboys, cattle drivers, and saloons. Doc Holliday quickly immersed himself into like a gritty environment, which he excelled at, by the way, and he enjoyed. So he discovered that gambling could be a lucrative occupation for the old boy. Obviously, as history have told, he was able to move about. He had plenty of money, he wore great clothes, and the way he dressed, the way he carried himself. He had plenty of ammunition, guns. He had the money. So he discovered that gambling could be a lucrative occupation and began frequenting poker tables and faro games. His skill with cards earned him money, and he got a lot of enemies too. Disputes escalated into violent confrontations. But despite his frail body, Doc was quick with the reflexes. There wasn't a lot of fisticuffs going on. The boys were quick to draw, quick to pull a knife, which we understand. I'm from Long Beach. The boys are quick to pull a knife around here too. And he was said to have killed a man in self-defense during an altercation over a card game, an event that further solidified his dangerous reputation. Now, after Dallas, Doc roamed the frontier. He was drifting between towns like Denison, Fort Griffin, and Dodge City. In Fort Griffin, he had a fateful encounter with Wyatt Earp. Now, we all know Wyatt Earp, a lawman who was chasing a fugitive at the time. Now, according to legend, Doc offered Wyatt his assistance, and the two men struck up an unlikely friendship. Their bond would grow stronger in Dodge City, Kansas, where Wyatt served as an assistant marshal, and Doc often backed him up in dangerous situations. Their partnership was built in a mutual respect, loyalty, understanding, and the harsh reality of a frontier life. Now, in the frontier, it's good to have your boys. You got to have the boys. You got to have some friends. Because being a loner around, if you do a little research on a lot of the characters in the Wild West, specifically Arizona, like Tucson and Tombstone, a lot of loners didn't last very long. They did not last long if they were trying to get ahead. If they were trying to rustle up some cattle or try to have anything of worth, they would get they wouldn't last long, especially if they like to throw a couple back. Now, alcohol was a-flowing. In addition to his skills, he was known for being a sharpshooter, a bit sarcastic, just like Val Kilmer played him in the movie. And he had a reputation for both being charming and willing to get into a fight, capable of disarming any opponent with a well-timed quip. Just like, the scene with when he had that altercation with Ike when they were playing cards, and he's like, maybe poker's just not your game, Ike. I know, let's have a spelling contest. He was known to have a lot of those little quips, a lot of the little funny things to say that would kind of disarm somebody, And I think they portrayed that really well in the movie. Now, in Tombstone, by 1880, Doc followed Wyatt all the way to Tombstone. So apparently, in the movie, Doc was already in there and Wyatt rolled in. But, a lot of things I've read, Doc came over because of Wyatt. And because it was a booming silver mining town. Tombstone was a booming. Tombstone was Vegas in the 80s. You know what I mean? And what's funny is if you've ever been to Tombstone, Arizona, and where all this happened, the famous part of Tombstone, when Wyatt Earp showed up, was only a 2-year span of time. And it was only right there on Allen Street. And if you ever visit, it's so small compared to what they all did around there is insane. You think of Las Vegas, think of Main Street. Think of one block. That's all that was, really. That's all that was. And, they were making money. Now, what money was back then was Wyatt had a nice house, okay? but his house is like a 1-bedroom apartment. It's tiny to what, we have now, but they didn't need a lot. Okay, let me get back to it. It was definitely a booming silver mining town, and it was where Doc's name would forever be etched in the Western lore. And the simmering tensions between the Earps and the Clanton and McLaury gang culminated in the legendary gunfight of the OK Corral on October 26, 1881. Now, it wasn't actually, it spilled over into that area, but that's not really a gunfight happened. It did not happen right there in the OK Corral. So, when you're in Tombstone, Arizona, they show you actually where the gunfight started. And the shootout lasted less than 30 seconds, but left 3 men dead and cemented Doc's reputation as the deadliest gunslinger because he was already smoking people anyways. Now, witnesses claim that Doc's actions were crucial in the fight despite his worsening health. Though he and the Earps were acquitted of the murders, their victory came at a cost. The vendettas that followed the claims, from the movie, the vendettas from the cowboys. We don't have all the time to get into that about the cowboys. I mean, I'll get into that next. There's so much to get into, but I think what I'm going to do with these biocasts, as I'm calling it, is a character at a time. And it doesn't have to always be Tombstone, but for some reason I'm just so interested in that era and in that section of the world right there in Tombstone, Arizona, because so much happened. I did a podcast about China Mary, and China Mary was the real gangster. If you guys get a chance, Google China Mary. She is nothing happened without China Mary's say so. I'm not going to go into it, but Google it. It's fascinating. She was a fascinating woman. Now, after Tombstone, Doc's health began to take a turn for the worst rapidly. In the movie, they got it going quick, but he wandered the West, from Colorado to New Mexico, seeking relief of his tuberculosis. But his body was failing. He had nothing left. And Doc continued to gamble and occasionally practiced some dentistry to make a couple bucks because he wasn't always robbing. He wasn't always gambling. So he got back into the practice. Now, you go, why go to Doc for dentistry? Because there's nobody else. There's nobody else. There's one other dentist. He's also a doctor. He does everything. They do everything with the same tools, by the way, too. Not very sterile. In 1887, Doc checked into his hotel in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which doubled as a sanatorium for tuberculosis patients. He spent his final days bedridden, reportedly sipping whiskey and reminiscing about his life. You could feel that, right? You could feel a man just going, I'm Doc Holliday, man. In just a few short years, he really took over because he was a badass and one of the tightest gunslingers. So in his final words, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead here. You could just picture Doc sitting there sipping whiskey, talking about his life, and he's got a lot to say. Doc Holliday died at the age of 36. Think how young that is and what kind of life he led up until that point. His final words was, "This is funny," are often interpreted as his realization that he had defied the odds by dying in bed, not in a gunfight. He was buried in the Linwood Cemetery overlooking the town of Glenwood Springs. Yeah, so I wanted to get that out of the way and let you know where he died. But it's so interesting how Doc Holliday became such a quick draw, such the fast gunslinger that he was. And the Wild West was not a place where disputes were often settled, with fists, or words, settled with guns, So Doc's survival demanded it. It was more than just using his intellect and his charm. So it required a lot of proficiency with a pistol. His journey into becoming a deadly shot wasn't immediate, but rather a gradual process born out of necessity. As a gambler back then, you had to, you were constantly in danger. Let's put it that way. Cheating accusations, drunken brawls, outright robbery attempts. You win a hand, they try to get you outside. And Doc learned real quick the way to ensure his safety was to become a faster draw. And he worked on it. He worked on it on his own. It's very interesting because you're like, well, he's a doctor, he's an aristocrat, he's an intellectual. What's he doing over there being such a quick draw? But whatever he did well to his best ability, while he was dying of tuberculosis, like his whole family. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Doc didn't grow up with a gun in his hand. And he grew up, he had a skill. And he got that skill from, relentless practicing. As a man of precision, thanks to his background in dentistry, approached shooting the same way. It was very meticulous how the gun works, how fast you can get it if you can shoot from the hip. A lot of movies they got the guys shooting from the hip, but that was not the way they went. That's a hard shot to hit a guy between the eyes from the hip. But I bet Doc did. The famous scene where he kills Johnny Ringo out there in the woods there. What they claim is that no one really knows who killed Johnny Ringo. Wyatt Earp seems to think that it was Doc, but Doc never admitted it. He never said he did it. In fact, he said he didn't do it. But everybody was like, it had to have been Doc. Had to have. So, but that's as far as they go with it. He just showed up and he had a bullet in him. So somebody did old Johnny Ringo in. And so Wyatt Earp didn't have to because Wyatt Earp probably would have got smoked by Johnny Ringo. So back to Doc, he spent hours perfecting his draw and aim, ensuring he could fire with deadly accuracy over and under pressure. And this coupled with his real cool demeanor, Doc's frail health might have made him a physically vulnerable, probably a smaller target too, But his sharp mind and quick reflexes turned him into a deadly marksman for sure. Now, let's talk Big Nose Kate. If we're talking Doc Holliday, talking his loyal partner there, girlfriend Big Nose Kate. Now, her nickname Big Nose Kate came from because she always had her nose in people's business, not because she had a big nose. So Doc's journey took him to Fort Griffin, Texas, in the late 1870s, and that's where he met Big Nose Kate, which her real name is Mary Catherine Horany, better known as Big Nose Kate. Kate was Hungarian. She was a Hungarian immigrant who had fled a privileged but troubled upbringing, whatever the troubled means. I get back then, who knows. By the time she met Doc, she had already built a reputation as a fiery, independent woman who could hold her own, in the roughest environments. There's a part in the movie where Doc Holliday says, "My sweet, soft Hungarian devil." I thought that movie did so great by just giving you these, because you only have a few hours to tell this story. So I thought that it was good to go, Kate's Hungarian. That's cool to know. They just threw that in there with a cool line, a cool southern drawl of Doc Holliday, of the way he was portrayed by Val Kilmer. The two were attached at the hip for a while. They were both outsiders in a harsh world. Kate admired Doc's intelligence and wit. Of course, a lot of women did, by the way. While Doc found in Kate a partner who wouldn't shy away from danger, their relationship was far from smooth. And she was fiery. There was a lot of arguments. They were constantly having at it. And of course, Doc getting hammered out there in the bars, getting annihilated, and she was mouthy. She got to him. But it was built on a mutual respect and loyalty that was endured. One of the most famous episodes in their relationship occurred in Fort Griffin. Doc had been arrested after a violent altercation, and it seemed likely he would face serious charges. And Kate determined to save him. Now, this is reportedly, she started a fire at a local building to create a diversion. And as the townfolk rushed to extinguish the blaze, Kate broke Doc out of jail. And this was a daring act, cemented their bond, adding to the legend of Doc Holliday and Big Nose Kate, you know. So, I mean, if your girl busts you out of jail, that's a down woman right there that you got. The legend grows. By the time Doc arrived in Dodge City, Kansas, you know, he already gained that reputation as a gunslinger. So when he got into Tombstone with Wyatt Earp, he'd already been in barroom brawls and shootouts, and Wyatt saw a lot of Doc's bravery and skill with a gun that further solidified, you know, his notoriety. Doc's name became synonymous with deadly precision and cold-blooded efficiency, which is pretty cool. You know what I mean? When you think of Doc Holliday, you think of a gunslinger. You don't think of as a mild-mannered dentist, do you? You know, and one story tells a time when an opponent mocked Doc's dark coughing fits. They mocked Doc's coughing fits, only to find himself staring down the barrel of Doc's Colt revolver. It's pretty cool. The man apologized profusely, and Doc, with a smirk, let him walk away. It was in these moments of both ruthless and restraint that made Doc a legend. Because he just, nobody wanted to fuck with him. No one really wanted to. They knew that he was quick to have a gunfight. He was quick. Now, Big Nose Kate was often by his side during all this, and tending to him with his tuberculosis, you know, as it worsened, and standing by him during his most dangerous encounters. She was not just a companion, but an active participant in his life, helping him navigate the precocious world of the frontier. Doc and Kate and Tombstone, you know, eventually made their way down to Tombstone from Dodge City to from Texas, and where they joined Wyatt Earp and all the brothers. The events leading up to the gunfight at the OK Corral are well documented, but what's often overlooked is Kate's role in supporting Doc during this turbulent tuberculosis time. And she cared for him with his health and stood by him as tensions with the Clanton and McLaury gang escalated. Now, the OK Corral cemented Doc's place in history, but it also marked the beginning of the end of the relationship of Kate and Doc. You know, their volatile personalities and the stress of their lifestyle eventually drove them apart, which happens a lot in relationships. We all get that. Now, despite their separation, Kate would later recall her time with Doc fondly, describing him as a man of contradictions and a brilliant yet reckless and compassionate yet deadly. Man, that's pretty sweet. Let's go ahead and end it right there. I wanted to throw Big Nose Kate in there because I'm not going to do a full cast on her, but she was a big part of his life and a big part of that fight in the OK Corral. I often wonder if she was kind of a different person, because she liked a lot of the fighting. She liked a lot of confrontation, as it were. So I sometimes wonder, would he be getting into a lot of these fights if it wasn't for her? I mean, he was already, getting ready to, so maybe he would have. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening. We'll be getting on to the next one. We'll just surprise you with all the bios. Till next time, later.